Hello. 5 years ago, Synchron commenced a journey that we didn't really want to take. The State Revenue Office of Victoria had decided that in order to raise revenue, it would levy payroll tax against Australian financial services licensees in relation to the commission and fees that were received by authorised representatives. These commissions and fees were applied to the smallest of the small businesses in Australia, and that is individual authorised representatives who have just started a new business, or individual authorised representatives who chose to have a small business and not employ anyone. As a licensee, and a substantial licensee, we felt that we had an obligation not just to ourselves but also to the industry not to accept blindly the assessment that was given to us. So 5 years ago we began a journey.
My involvement started after the untimely death of Paul Wrigglehuth. Paul had been looking after the file on behalf of Synchron. When I read it, it didn't make any sense to me. To use a comparison, if I was a Jim's Mowing franchisee and I mowed your lawn and I charged you a fee, there was no question about that being subject to payroll tax. Yet, if I was a financial advisor and I earned some commission, according to the State Revenue Office in Victoria, I could be liable, depending on the circumstances, I could be liable for payroll tax. And the difference is that a financial services licensee is required under legislation to collect the money on behalf of the advisor and to pay it on to the advisor. Of course, what we forget sometimes is that they're doing other things. They're managing compliance, they're arranging PI, they're arranging education, they're doing all of the things that are required under the corporations law, but they're being treated differently. So my response was to go to as many politicians and as many other influential people as I could to try and put a case that this should be looked at in a different way. I went to the FSC, the Financial Services Council. I went to the AFA, the FPA, the AIOFP, to every industry association. And we didn't get a whole lot of support from some of them. The FPA asked their members to write to politicians, and that was great. The AIOFP actually offered to raise some funds for us to help us with the costs of running the matter. But generally speaking, we were left on our own. And one of the reasons was that a lot of other licensees who'd been approached had just decided it was easier to settle. That's not the option that we chose. We requested the State Revenue Office of Victoria to refer the matter to the Supreme Court, and they did so. And as they did that, we also lobbied a number of politicians. In fact, I wrote to every Victorian Liberal Member of Parliament. I went to see Mike Baird in New South Wales, who was the Treasurer at the time. We went to see Bruce Bilson, who was the Small Business Minister, Matthias Cormann, the Finance Minister, Josh Frydenberg, Kelly O'Dwyer, the list goes on. There were many of them. And many of them were supportive. In fact, I have a letter on file from Bruce Bilson saying that he'd been approached by Kelly O'Dwyer and Greg Hunt on our behalf. But the bottom line was that they didn't want to change the legislation. They didn't want to do anything that would impede the states from collecting payroll tax. So eventually we were listed for hearing, and we lodged our documents with the Supreme Court of Victoria, and we didn't know what the outcome was. And I can tell you that up until that point in time, we spent a lot of money, in excess of $500,000 in legal fees, to bring this matter on, because we think it's such an important industry issue. And John Prosser will tell you about the outcome.
Hello, I have here a letter that our lawyers who represented us on this matter received from the State Revenue Office of Victoria last Wednesday, the 1st of June. It was headed Synchronised Business Services Proprietary Limited versus the Commissioner of State Revenue, and I'm just going to directly quote the first sentence to you. I quote, "The Commissioner has determined on the basis of the evidence presented by your client that your client is correct to contend that the arrangements between your client and its authorised representatives are not relevant contracts for the purposes of Section 32(1)(b) of the Payroll Tax Act 2007. We believe that's the correct and the just outcome from this matter, firstly for Synchron and its authorised representatives, but of course also for the industry at large.